Hola, and buenos dias, GnGs. My name is Trekkw2ks, and welcome to another episode of Weekend Crypto brought to you here on the Gentleman Crypto Network. As you can see in the title, we got some clickbait things going on, but when I give you context, they will make sense. And so, as I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, we are in the tax season, so this episode is brought to you by CJ the Smart Guy. He is a certified, I don't know why I say it that way, but he's a CPA, y'all, and he's particularly focuses on crypto-related taxes. So for those who are business folks or individuals on the retail level of it, hey, not telling you got to use the guy. I'm just saying, in full disclosure, he is my actual CPA. And if you're in American jurisdictions, you definitely want to cross your T's and dot your I's. Why? Because the IRS has definitely made it clear through a case that happened last year that they realize, hey, the regular folks are the people who have the easier crypto that they can get, or better yet, they're the easier ones to tax because you don't have the $500 hour lawyer to fight them. But anywho, link for his stuff will be in the description, and I give this out as a resource so you have a comparison of how to understand your CPA when you're doing your due diligence in finding a CPA for your tax situation. That's a housekeeping thing right there. Next thing to say is I got some stories, I guess a win for crypto mining, another funny situation in relation to Wright and the whole thing about the Satoshi emails. And we've got a couple other things to cover. Yo, Australia, what are y'all doing in y'all court system? How is it that you've had at least 3 situations? You know what? We're going to jump into the stories. Go from there. So again, as I always say, thank you to folks who are coming back. Thank you to folks who are discovering me for the first time. I appreciate the scammers and I appreciate the lurkers. Why? Because on the back end, we see the numbers. And so we know that folks are watching, even though YouTube plays or YouTube algos play with the number count. But anywho, let's jump into these stories. All right, so here we have it on this first story, right? UK plans to recognize cryptocurrencies as properties for legal protection. So basically, this boils into the UK is not falling in line with what the, not ECB, but what, how do I say this? Y'all know that my whole thing is about not using like price talk as the talking points within these stories, or basically how things like kind of scratch my brain and draw my attention in. And with this, what got my attention was you have what the European Union is saying how they want to move with crypto. You had what came out in the latter part of last year as far as MiCA and the regulatory framework that Europe was looking to push out for cryptocurrencies. And now you have UK kind of saying, well, we want to kind of do this extra step, this separate thing, which comes into this whole thing of seeing it as a property, which they're specifically looking at things as far as recategorizing cryptos to say digital assets. And in general, what we know about how technology works or anything of like new innovation is you will have, let's say, the regulators of the traditional systems look to then redefine the new things to fit in the old system, which then is well, we still have jurisdiction over this thing, even though it's something new. I guess as we progress and as the industry matures, we'll see how this plays out and does this actually hold favor. If you're across the pond amongst them, if somebody could drop something in a comment, like, how are you guys seeing this actually being there? That's the part that I'm more curious about. Like, it's one thing to hear the story in one of these news cycles, but it's another thing to actually talk with somebody who's there to be like, okay, what does it look like for you on ground? Case in point, I had covered a story the other day about what was going on in Guyana. And I was talking to somebody I know Honduras. I was talking to somebody that I went to college with who's from there. And I was like, hey, have you heard of these 2 places here that they're making sound to be very up and coming and popular, that are like these, like Bitcoin Beach in like Costa Rica and stuff. And so, is that Costa Rica? Anywho, the point being is he has a house down there, and he was like, no, I have no idea about that place that you're talking about. It might be something that they're selling for the outside attention of people coming in, but as far as the locals are concerned, like, it's not what's going on. that's my point about the whole thing of actually networking and reaching out to people who are actually local to whatever it is you're trying to find out about. The perspective that you get between what is in the news cycle versus somebody who's actually there sometimes ends up being two different things. I just want to make that as the point. And so this idea of the proposal really that the UK's government currently is saying, hey, we want to make cryptocurrency property. We'll see if it actually goes through, or we'll see what the final bill actually looks like, probably after the American elections, which arguably, like, you would think there wouldn't be any correlation with the American elections, but I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of geopolitical things that are going on that are being pushed or paused or throttled based on American elections. I'm not 100% certain that like the UK's crypto thing, but based on other things going on in their governments in that region and the other things I pay attention to, as I tell y'all, I think that this probably won't really pan out until after our elections. So just throwing that one out there for y'all. Next story. Also I gotta add in, I didn't do the full cycle of how I would go through like the 48-hour, 72-hour window. I'm on the road again, so I had to really scrape through in a more consolidated 24-hour window. So I definitely probably missed some stuff that popped off on like Saturday or Friday, right? But nonetheless, here are the things that scratch my brain, right? So this joint actually made me laugh. Privacy Focus Alo, user concerned after KYC documents leak. So basically what happens is this, right? Alo is a so-called DeFi, sorry about that. Why does this always happen? All right, so Alo is a so-called DeFi project. And in order for you to get their airdrop, or the reward that they wanted you to KYC, and then you also had to pass the OFAC screening process because of how they set up their policies, right? That's the short of what this article is talking about. My issue with the article is that they get into this whole thing about how Alo uses ZK Snark as their encryption thing, which really means nothing in relation to what the actual issue is in this particular situation. They used a third-party company that doesn't encrypt the information that they collected from people. And then somehow the PII of the people who KYC'd through the third-party platform ends up being sent to a distro of the people who KYC'd. So it's one of those like, well, who do you hold accountable for this? Do you hold the third party accountable for this? Or do you hold Alo accountable and say, well, you guys hired them, they did this thing. And do remember here, I don't know if they're actually an American-based company, but considering that it has to do with OFAC, or OFAC is a part of their process, I'm imagining they're American-based or connected somehow. But we just had the thing that passed about how you have to report data leaks within a certain period of time. And if there's some level of liability, it can definitely get into the, is it civil court or it might be criminal court for, well, how do you make the people whose information was leaked whole? Or like, what do you do to compensate those folks? Which also then gets me into this foolery of, remember, I think I said this like 2 or 3 stories back about the lick that is going on with the traditional finance related companies, where when there is a data leak, they offer you the service of, hey, we'll give you a credit or a financial monitoring subscription for 12 to 24 months. I wonder if that's the thing that they're going to try to throw to the users of this platform who KYC'd and had their information, quote, leaked out there. And understand, it works free, quote, for 12 to 24 months, depending on who's offering the thing. And then what happens? You're charged. So arguably, again, this is me putting on the tinfoil toboggan. Within this decade, we're going to see a number of people complaining about how they're being charged for financial monitoring services because, and I thought it was also interesting of the window that you get the service offered. Think about when you do a subscription to something, if you're not really paying attention to it and it just comes up annually, or if it comes up every 2 years or 3 years. Like, I literally just had to cancel something the other day that I did not realize jumped up to a couple $100. Luckily, the platform is really cool with being like, all right, we'll refund you. We're sorry to see you go and stuff. But that's not going to be a number of these other platforms that are offering these financial monitoring services. I throw that out there as a random, again, tinfoil toboggan on what is this company going to do when folks start getting aggy and want to start pressing lawsuits on them? Are they going to try to kick the can over to the third party? Or are they going to try to actually own up to the situation? And would that monitoring service be a part of the deal? I don't know, but I know that I've been seeing it pop up more and more over the last 3 years. That's my point. If you are somehow involved in this, you might want to do your due diligence and figure out what's going on as it relates to your PII. I'm not telling you what is good or bad. I'm just saying this situation seems like it will have more spill out down the road. And you got to understand, like, the whole thing of, like, when you have the data leaks, quote, it might happen today, but the information might not be utilized for like 9 months, 12 months. Sometimes, like, there are situations where, like, you'll immediately see phishing emails go out and things like that. But there are other times where, like, it might be 9 months down the road before whoever comes into accessing of that PII decides to use it for something. Just throwing that out there. If you're on the platform, do your due diligence on that one. Next story is, so malicious code in Trekkw2ks' governance proposal poses risk. So basically what happened on this one is all right, so there's Trekkw2ks on IPFS, right? And someone basically proposed a contract upgrade or a protocol to add into the contract. And it then turns out, again, this being open source because it's put on GitHub, that you had the peer review thing. So X number of people are going through the code and they're like, hey, we see something that is funky. We think this code could be problematic. Meaning that it basically allows the account to be drained. If this code was in full implementation and if you were using Trekkw2ks as it's set up within the IPF setup, right? And so this is being called out. In my mind, this shows, one, a good thing of community policing, because you had the community actually like review the code, see, confirm, and inform other folks in the larger community about the issue. I also do wonder if the bad actor who put this proposal in has connections to certain groups, whether they be, quote, stateside or not stateside, right? That cyber game is a very asymmetric thing that it doesn't follow any of the traditional rules of friend or foe. That was just my thought process on that and throwing that out there. So for anybody who's messing around in the Trekkw2ks realm, you might want to do your due diligence in how you have things going on with your wallets and like what side you're using. Just throwing that out there. All right. This was what I was talking about with the whole thing about Australia. And basically, Australian man disappears after receiving $500,000 in crypto by mistake. So what is it? This is like the third or fourth story where someone in Australia somehow got a exorbitant amount of crypto, realized what was going on and said, hey, not your keys, not your cheese. It's a one-way deal. I'm out. That's what this dude did. He has the company. What's the guy's name? Where's it at? So Kao Zhang Chia? I might be saying the last name wrong for sure. But basically what happened was he got nearly $1 million and he was able to cash out $500,000 between like a stable coin and was it Tether and something else. And then he basically just was like, I'm out. Now, authorities are like, well, hey, we need to hold him accountable. He needs to give back the money. The company wants to sue, blah, 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 blah. Like, but this goes to the point of how traditional finance and the idea of financial accountability and financial responsibility is not about that wording or phrasing in the true meaning of, if I make the mistake, quote mistake, of sending my money to someone, is it their responsibility to give me back the money? In terms of crypto, no. In terms of moral and social judgment, yes. But that's not how the technology works, folks. And we've been saying this for years. And so you have it that X number of people might argue, I mean, it's a big company, they can do some tax write-off kind of thing. It's not the end of the world for them. Other folks who are in my era might be like, well, you know, if they messed up and sent it, that's on them. Don't know how this is going to play out as far as like, will they be able to find this dude? But I just thought it was an interesting, funny story to know, and also very coincidental of like, this is like the third or fourth story that has happened out in Australia over the last, I want to say year and a, no, let's go back to, it's like as far back, I think it's like 22. This has happened in Australia. Why this can't happen here in the States? Why it can't happen to me? I don't know, but apparently Australia is the spot to be in. All right, jumping off to this next one. Texas Blockchain Council and Riot platform secure legal win over energy authorities. So I covered a story about the EIA, I think it was last week, where they were basically sending out these questionnaires to all of the crypto-related mining companies, and they wanted to know everything from top to bottom about the mining facility and the operations and the types of mining equipment they used, the power consumption rate, how were things maintained, what was the cost average, things along that line. And when I was reading this article, what it made me think about was folks who remember, this is pre-C19, when Hester Pierce made her proposal for the SEC to do the sandbox program. And this, when I thought about it, is pretty much this, like, granted, the EIA is doing this as it's a questionnaire. We would like you to comply with it, which was also, I'm gonna get into the point. Let me finish on the Hester Pierce thing. I remember when folks were saying like, oh, this would be a good thing because Hester Pierce is a friend to the space. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You can't ask someone, let me know everything about how your business works, and you can operate in this sandbox period, and I have to also get your source code. That was the other thing. I got to know your business operation and your technical operation, and I want source code. And then be like, everything will be cool, and you can operate for 2 years without the SEC going after you. It made no sense back then with how Hester Pierce suggested that, how the SEC would have even let that ride. And it makes no sense now how, and I said this when I initially covered the story, that the EIA was coming in to be like, oh yeah, we just want to ask a couple of questions. Like, they proposed it that it would take like 30 minutes. And then it turns around that once some of the companies actually started complying, they realized like, oh no, this takes like a week to answer all of these questions, which means I got to actually put somebody on this task to do this job. And it's an inconvenience because they're not doing the job I actually paid them for. So the bottom line is Riot and the Texas Blockchain Council sue the EIA and the department that they're under of irreconcilable damages and the thing of the overreach. And basically a judge agreed with it. So arguably this is a hand clap for the Texas Blockchain Council and the Riot platforms for being able to put a buffer or a pause on the government's overreach in this regards. Now, how long will this last? Because obviously they're going to look to do a counter thing and try to figure out some other way to still get the information they want. Remember what happened when the IRS was going at Coinbase and X number of the other American exchanges on how they wanted the information, and there was like a pause for what, 6 months, 9 months, and then eventually They gave all the information. Coinbase sells a management software tool to the FBI and a couple of other agencies. So it's like, I guess we're going to see how this plays out. Victory for right now, but it doesn't mean that we've won the war in terms of how the government will look to manage or set guiding policies for the growing crypto mining sector. That's the bottom line on that one. And so we're going to keep track and see, how this goes as the decade progresses, right? Again, if for those of you who are out there doing mom and pop level mining stuff, in my mind, this does relate to y'all too. This is not just commercial level stuff, because eventually it will trickle down. And as I've said since last year, when Biden did his executive order, like, the dog whistle has blown. So you will have actions being taken at 4 levels. It'll be federal, state, county, and city. And based on how this last 18 months has worked out, like, we've literally seen things going in pro and con actions, as far as like who's coming up with a proposal, who's coming up with an actual bill, what's actually passing at those various levels. This is one of the other things to keep on the radar if you're interested, involved, or have any activity related to mining. Just throwing that out there. All right, on this one, yeah, again, EU is out here doing some interesting things, right? So European Data Act in January 2024 went into force, and the legislation has far-reaching requirements that could force smart contract developers to comply with strict requirements. The bottom line of it is that the EU, through this Data Act, is saying that they need to have kill switches / backdoors into smart contracts, which are built based on immutability of data. So the act that in name is supposed to be a pro for smart contracts actually does the total opposite of it. And this question for me then gets into, well, how are we going to look at development within the EU as we progress through this decade? And I don't see this as a positive thing. Again, from a regulator standpoint, from a law enforcement standpoint, the idea is that, well, we need to have some level of control over these types of self-executing contracts. We either need to be able to reverse them, stop them, or pause them, right? Now, the funny part to me on this is, this to me sounds like it lines up very well to Solana. So if you're a Solana fanboy, fangirl, whatever, like, this should be up your alley, because Solana cut off 8 times in 1 year, but yet for whatever reason, there's been a number of biz dev things happening over like the last 6 months with Solana that really surprised me, considering that track record. Now, am I saying Solana is the worst thing on the planet? No, I'm not saying that at all. Am I saying Solana is the best thing on the planet? That is not exactly what I'm saying, but granted, I might feel like that at times. What I am saying is, we have legislation and we have acts being put in place that counter the early day narratives that were sold on the technology of blockchain and smart contracts and NFTs, and the idea of immutability, provenance, self-agency, and being permissionless. That's what I'm saying. Will it actually hold out? I don't know. There are times when I really feel good about the space, and there are times when I do not feel good about the space, because where I am now, and granted, Zay says the thing about the whole capitulation thing, but like, those of us who were in the pre-17 wave era, whatever you want to call it, the mindset was different. The 08 recession was still fresh on people's brains, relatively speaking. The new folks coming in, they're not on that. They barely remember what the foolery of C19, let alone 07, 08. Like, so I don't know, man. We'll see how this play out. Granted, I will say it's been interesting to watch how the Europeans have been doing their form of protest. And I know that there are other issues going on in their worlds and in the world in general, aside from this crypto stuff, which arguably is probably like number 10 on the list of things going on. But eventually this or things like this will be more relatable as the applications and integrations of the technology into everyday life start to be more apparent, I should say that way. Again, these are the things that scratch my brain. I'm not saying I know all of the right and wrong answers of it all. It's just things that end up on my radar, and for me, keep track, and hopefully I say something that gets the rest of y'all to think or question, right? But anywho, next story. ECB fears that this market rally isn't based on fundamentals. So if you don't know what the ECB is, it is the European Central Bank. And here you have it that none other than Christine Lagarde is the one who is pushing these, arguably, I'm going to use a fancy word of fallacies, right? And falsehoods. In that she's saying the stuff like, hey, you know, there's a lot of illicit activity. It's only good for illicit activity. And there's manipulation and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, we know that the FBI has said, hey, there is not the level of criminal activity in terms of monetary amount that was initially proclaimed in the Wall Street article, in some of the U.S. committee, financial committee hearing sessions. And so this whole thing of like crypto works only for criminals is a lie. It's a fallacy. And here we have Christine Lagarde talking about manipulation, and it's just like, well, ma'am, it almost sounds like what you're doing is on some Jamie Dimon level shit, where you're looking to, through news distribution of you talking and saying stuff, influence the market. She's literally doing the same thing Jamie Dimon does here in the States. Let me give the negative talking points, and in turn, that affects the more commercial side of the space, but in particularly for the EU side. So what she's saying is really more geared towards the EU market. Like, it's a home based talking point thing versus an international. Let's say, like, she's not talking to like the Ecuadorians or the Argentinians. No, she's talking to the Germans, the Poles, the British, the French, right? But not like the quote everyday person, more along the lines of the governmental and the business sector people. But nonetheless, she's still talking out her ass, and this is just positioning, which means, again, even in this case, like, she's positioning now and throwing out the negative stories that will get more clarity on how things look after the American election. Like, it's so crazy how our stuff is crossing the way it is. Again, just something to throw on the radar. When you start seeing folks like this talking, something else is going on. Just throwing that out there. But I'm not even going to jump down that rabbit hole, because I heard some really, like, as Crypto Blood says, conspiracy fact level stuff, but it's not conspiracy fact, it's conspiracy theory right now. But after the elections happen, this might turn into a conspiracy fact. And if it does, I will definitely bring this up down the road. But anywho, next story. So, Satoshi Nakamoto's emails spill early Bitcoin secrets. All right, so basically, there's a gentleman who was one of the early original people communicating with Satoshi via email. Excuse me. His name is Marty Malmi. I might be saying his name way wrong, but he basically releases 120 pages of email exchanges between him and Nakamoto, and he put it out on GitHub, so anybody else can go and read this and see some stuff. My first initial thought was, well, why would you drop this now? Like, we are at year, what are we at, year 15, 14, 15? Like, Bitcoin is officially a teenager now, my man. Where have you been this whole time? Why didn't you drop this earlier? It turns out that this came out when, I'm gonna say sorry but not sorry for the clickbait title, because this is surrounding Craig Wright and his case for claiming he is Satoshi Nakamoto. That's how this came out, which then makes me wonder, like, well, if this came out through the court case, wouldn't that mean that other people had access to the email to know that the stuff existed? But whatever on that. It does give some insight in regards to what Satoshi was thinking about how to incentivize people to be more interested in crypto, as well as the whole thing of, like, as they puts it again, the whole capitulation as far as the establishment and trade fine. And so if you are interested into it, I believe there's a link someplace in this article that you can dig into that on your own, or just go to GitHub and you'll find it on there. I just thought about that now, sorry. For those who are the Bitcoiner folks, this might be something you might want to do a little bit more due diligence in, to have a deeper, quote, level of awareness. For the other folks who are like, oh man, Bitcoin is the old blockchain stuff. We need the new, we need that Solana, we need that Cosmos. This just is whatever for you. For the folks who are on Bitcoin Cash and who believe that Craig Wright is the original Satoshi Nakamoto, like, all right, I don't even know what to say to y'all folks, honestly. But at the end of the day, these emails did not help Craig Wright's argument, because he still hasn't been able to sign any of the transactions to just simply validate it on that point. So the emails didn't help him in any way. But as far as the number of articles that I've seen covering this, it basically gave a little bit more insight to how Satoshi saw some of the potential issues going forward from traditional financial institution side of the house, as well as the governmental side of the house. So, I mean, I guess yay for knowing more. I don't know. Y'all take it how y'all take it. Also, if you disagree with any of what I've said today, like, remember, like, comments is open. I'm gonna try to be in a live chat and paying attention, but again, I'm on the road, so kind of might not be able to respond right away to y'all. But if you do have a thought on something, throw it out there. Let's see, right? Remember, I always say I'm okay with the pushback. And as I say, we don't delete, but we do keep receipts. So yeah. All right, last joint here is U.S. prosecutors seek stricter bail conditions for Binance founder CZ. Here is the funny thing about this, what is mind-blowing to me. The DOJ is saying that he needs to give up his Canadian passport. Let me put that in context for y'all. If he has to give up his Canadian passport, that means he's not a citizen of the US. If he has to give up his Canadian passport and it's another country other than his country telling him, hey, you got to give up your passport, what are we doing here, folks? What are we doing? It doesn't make, let me not say it that way. It makes sense in that there is a level of degree to how the DOJ and the SEC and other enforcement agencies work, right? The modus operandi, right? We take away your ability to finance your legal defense. We limit your ability of movement. We put X amount of pressure on folks connected around you. And so we isolate you effectively in a three-tier way, right? And in my mind, it's just still kind of mind-blowing to me that he's not a citizen and they're able to have this level of sway. And I said it in the beginning, I initially thought he was getting a break. Now, I didn't think he was getting Arthur Hayes level break, because Arthur walked away relatively nice, scot-free, house arrest in, I forgot. Let me not run down that rabbit hole. But the point being is, I don't understand why they decided to bring this level of condition in at the last minute the way they're doing it. It again, I've been wondering and voicing the opinion that there is some level of proxy engagement going on with Binance International, and I think that getting CZ out of the way was definitely an important thing in the beginning, because of who's in there now. And so it still makes me wonder, well, why are y'all messing with him now that you have him out? You have the DOJ sitting in on the company that, again, is not an American company. And what's the point of this? I don't know. I don't sit in any of those meetings. I don't have any of those connections. Just thought it was an interesting story that they're deciding to do this with him now, which is just like, what are you guys doing? I don't know, but I guess we'll see how it plays out. And honestly, and I've said it before, I'm not like the biggest fan of CZ for some of the past things that he's done in the space, but for how they're doing him, it's definitely starting to look a little bit more questionable outside of like, oh, you ran an unregistered business in our jurisdiction. This is starting to grow beyond that. At least that's my take on it. But nonetheless, that's the last story I got for y'all. And it's late. I'm tired. And it's a Monday at this point. And so closing out as far as the housekeeping goes, as I said, this episode is brought to you by CJ the Smart Guy. If you're looking for a CPA, I got the contact for him in the description on this. It's not a referral link. It's not no kickback on my side. Full disclosure, again, he is my actual CPA, but it is a matter of, if you are in the American jurisdiction, you really need to start working on crossing your T's and dotting your I's. And when you're doing your due diligence and figuring out who you choose as your CPA, this might be a good reference. Just throwing that out there. As I say, folks, have a productive or a busy day. If it can't be a productive day, from one human to the next, the best thing that I can say is at least be in a safe place, in a safe space, and in good company. And from human to the next, that is the best that I can wish you. So, yeah, 1.